Good evening and welcome to the press conference following this informal extraordinary Foreign Affairs Council. The HRVP will brief you on the outcome of today's FAC and will take a few questions. So, dear High Representative, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for this attending this meeting and this press conference after the fourth meeting of the Foreign Affairs Ministers in a week. Look, everybody perceives that we are in unprecedented times, that we are living a historic moment. And I know that the word historic is often overused and abused, but this is certainly at that moment a historic moment for two reasons. First, because it's the first time since the end of the Second World War that a military power invades another sovereign state in violation of the international rule. And secondly, because Europeans have been reacting in a way that has surprised a lot of people, to start with the Russians themselves. And it's often said that the most important advances in the European construction are made through crisis, or during the crisis, or due to the crisis. And I believe that maybe we are in one of these moments, when a crisis allows us to advance, leap forward, and another taboo has fallen these days. The taboo that the European Union cannot use their resources to provide arms to a country who is being aggressed by others. Yes, they are unprecedented times, because the war is back in our borders. And that's why it is a defining moment for the European history. A page of the history has been turned, and we have been working around the clock during those days. And I am proud to see that the European Union has been able to show its capacity to deliver, to help its neighbours, with the idea of urgency. This is good, to be able to deliver with the idea of urgency when one of our neighbours and partners is being invaded by Russia. During the weekend we have been working very hard, and we want to take some decisions that should be in place, agreed, and legal act, implementing them before tomorrow, when the central banks will restart working. And today we have taken, well, this was an informal meeting. You know that it doesn't take specific decisions, concrete actions, provides political agreements that they will be converted on legal instruments and precise and concrete decisions by written procedure on the following hours. But the Council has been given his assessment, his support, his political agreement for a package of support of the Ukrainian armed forces, for new sanctions, for diplomatic engagements in order to isolate Russia, for measures to support Ukraine and the region, and measures to counter disinformation. Not bad. And since there is a fully fledged war in Ukraine, and we want to do everything to support Ukraine, we have decided to use our capacities to provide arms, lethal assistance to the Ukrainian army by a value of 450 million of support package and 50 more millions for the non-lethal supplies, fuel, protective equipment. All this will be covered by our European Peace Facility and Intergovernmental Fund. And this is the first time in the history that we will be doing that. And everybody agreed, or at least not obstruct this decision. I want also to thank Poland, who has offered to serve as a logistic hub for the transfer of this assistance, this material assistance, to Ukraine, because now we have approved the financing. Tomorrow the defense ministers will meet in order to coordinate how do we convert this financing into material and how this material is being transported to the front line, to the Ukrainian armed forces fighting against the Russian invasion. Thanks to Poland to serve as a hub, and we will also work to enhance the cyber defense of Ukraine. On sanctions, we have agreed to increase the peoples and entities that are going to be subject to restrictive measures. The full list will be finished by the repair and published tomorrow. This includes Russian oligarchs and businessmen whose listing carries huge economic impact, and political figures who hold key role of the Putin system in Russia, both the ones who disseminate propaganda, propagandists, and military. In addition, we have decided to close the European Union airspace to the Russian aircraft. Not a single Russian aircraft will be able to land or take off from the European Union airfields. And in accordance with the agreements that President von der Leyen already anticipated yesterday, after working with the G7 members, we are taking a package of measures that the Council has approved with some questions about the scope, but full support to these measures who are really effectively cripple the Russian financial market. We are excluding a certain number of Russian banks from SWIFT. You know that this was something that we have been talking about, and you in the press has been asking about it for days. It was discussed at the European Union Council the other day. At that moment it was not the necessary consensus, but immediately after we continue working on it because, as we said, everything is on the table. We have been continuing with that, working with our like-minded countries, because such a measure has to be taken in coordination with other countries. It's difficult to take this kind of measure alone, and reach an agreement to take out of SWIFT a certain number of Russian banks, impose restrictive measures that will paralyze the assets of the Russian central bank. More than a half, or about a half, of the financial reserves of the Russian central bank will be frozen thanks to this measure, because they are held in banks of the G7 countries, and this represents more or less half of the reserves of the Russian government. This will be frozen, and this is going to be affecting a lot the financial system of Russia. As I said, this is being done in coordination with international partners, with a clear message that Russians who enable the invasion of Ukraine will have to pay a very high price for this action. We are going after the wealth of Putin's elite, people who support him and benefit from this regime. And in addition to this new package of sanctions, we are advancing work on sanctions regimes targeting corruption specifically, as well as foreign information manipulation and interference. Third line of work of the ministers today: engage on diplomatic efforts. They are already producing results, as you have seen on the vote on the Security Council. No one supporting Russia. And work in order to make the widest possible international condemnation and isolation of Russia. Russia will be isolated by the international community. One of the results of our collective diplomatic outreach was the vote on the Security Council, and now it will be on the resolution of the General Assembly, which is expected on Wednesday. We are carrying an intensive diplomatic effort to isolate Russia as much as possible in the international and regional organizations. The Council of Europe has already suspended Russia's right of vote. Discussions on the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development are ongoing, and there will be an important debate at the Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday. We will continue on that line. The fourth is to support the people affected by the conflict, who will be in need of humanitarian assistance, people who are leaving the country. We cannot call them migrants, they are just refugees looking for asylum, escaping the war. We are extremely worried about the humanitarian dimension of this tragedy, and we need to act rapidly in order to support these people and support the countries who will receive them. We have activated our civil protection mechanism, and 18 member states are channeling critical humanitarian equipment to Ukraine. People in Ukraine and people leaving Ukraine. We will have to face a challenging situation, but we are ready for it. Let's see what's happened in the following days, but certainly the number of people leaving Ukraine is increasing. And the last point that will interest especially you, the people who work on the information business or industry, we need to tackle disinformation. We need to counter the Russian state-controlled narrative, because disinformation is becoming massive and is now shifting to a full-fledged war propaganda. Have a look at our reports, have a look at the website of the Stratcom, and you will see how Russian media describe what's happening in Ukraine and how are they describing President Zelensky. We need to be vigilant about an obvious manipulation, because Putin wants not only to conquer space, but to conquer the minds of the people. And we have to fight against it, and for that we are going to ban Russia Today and Sputnik from broadcasting in the Union, because they are the champions of information manipulation. We also agreed to strengthen our support for independent media in Ukraine and Russia. And last but not least, we are worried for what may happen in the whole region. We are afraid that Russia is not going to stop in Ukraine. And the Russian influence can start working in the neighbor countries, Moldova and Georgia, and also will have an impact on the Western Balkans. So we have to pay a lot of attention to what's happening there. I am planning to fly and to visit Moldavia in the same way that I visited Ukraine on the first day of this year. And we have to remain vigilant on the impact of the crisis in the Western Balkans and look what's happening of the positions, of the alignment of the countries of the Balkans who are candidates to the European Union, the alignment with our foreign policy. In conclusion, once again, this is a defining moment for Europe. This is the occasion to demonstrate strategic and global leadership in a united manner, to act united and quickly. And this is also an occasion to think about what the European Union is and what do we want the European Union to be. because the challenges that we are going to face as Europeans will increase. And we have to be prepared for that, for us and for the future generations. We say often that the European Union was born in the aftermath of the World War II because we wanted peace and prosperity, and that's true. And we got peace and prosperity. The European Union is a peace project, and we want to continue fighting for peace for us and for the humankind. We want to keep peace in Europe, but we have to be prepared to defend this peace. And what is happening in Ukraine will be an awakening moment for the people who believe that only united, Europeans will be able to face the challenges of the future.
Thank you.
And now I am at your disposal for a few questions.
Okay. Thanks a lot. So we will take a bit of questions from the room, and I have the first one I will grant to a journalist from Ukraine.
Mr. President, you said that, okay, my name is Olena, and right now I'm representing all Ukrainian media, because in Ukraine right now all TV channels are showing the same picture. We are sharing responsibilities. You said that it's a fourth meeting, and also it's a fourth day Ukrainians are fighting. It's a fourth day children are dying. It's a fourth day buildings are being bombed. My mom just sent me a message that in one village, people are even looking for windmills to make some bread for them already, because Russian army is robbing the villages, and Ukrainian soldiers are protecting the main cities. And still, the main cities of our country are still under Ukrainian government. I think it's clear that Ukraine will not surrender. So my question is, why only some Russian banks are cut from SWIFT? What are you waiting for? Isn't it clear that people are not going to surrender? Are you waiting till more people die in Ukraine? Thank you.
Certainly not. To disconnect the financial system of a country which is strongly interrelated with other countries and other economies cannot be done like this, with the scissors overnight. We have learned something from the Iranian experience, and we believe that we have to keep a possibility for the financial system to work in order to people to use it and to send money to their relatives and to pay something that is certainly necessary to continue exchanging with Russia. But don't worry, this degree of disconnection is carefully calibrated in order to create the maximum damage to the financial system of Russia while keeping the minimum level of interconnection with other financial systems.
Thank you very much. Now I will take a question from our colleagues who are connected remotely, and I give the question to Irini.
Thank you, Nabila. High Representative, I would like to ask you, are you afraid that Putin is going to use chemical weapons? Have you discussed about this? Because that kind of information maybe is something he's thinking of. Thank you.
Lo que pueda estar pensando el señor Putin, look, just to mention the possibility of using nuclear weapons, it's so a gigantic irresponsibility that says a lot about the personality of who is doing that. It's such a big responsibility at that moment that, frankly, one cannot imagine someone able to say these kind of things. But he has said, he told us, whoever will interfere in my attack to Ukraine, whoever could have the idea of support the Ukrainians will suffer an attack as they have never suffered, something that they can never imagine. Certainly, this is a reference to the use of nuclear weapons.
I think
nevertheless, we will continue supporting Ukraine.
Now, from the room, is it Angela? Yes. Okay, you have the floor.
Yes. Hi, thanks for the opportunity. Two quick questions. Putin alerted the nuclear deterrent system in Russia. Did you discuss this, and what's your evaluation, yours and the minister's evaluation? And the other thing is about SWIFT. Can we know exactly the number of the banks which will be excluded from SWIFT? Thanks.
Well, to the first question, I already answered it. I have nothing more to say. Certainly, everybody is aware of these threats, these crazy threats, but this doesn't prevent us from doing what we think we have to do. And about the number of banks, you will see tomorrow when it's going to be published the list of the banks that is going to be affected by this decision. There is a certain number of Russian banks. Work is in progress, but sorry, you will have to wait for some hours. That's not easy to decide these kind of things, and we are working against the clock because everything has to be done before tomorrow morning.
Thanks a lot. Now, Marcus Becker, you have the floor.
Yes, good evening, High Representative. I would like to have two questions, if I may. The first being that you've mentioned the military material now being sent to Ukraine in the value of several million, hundreds of millions of euros. So that is a considerable amount of material. And given that the Russian Air Force has complete air superiority over Ukraine, how do you envision to get this material into Ukraine? Are you not afraid that the moment it crosses the border, it's going to be attacked by the Russian forces? And the second question is about the ban of Russia Today and Sputnik. How exactly are you going to keep them from broadcasting into Europe? Because what's going to keep them from disseminating their stuff from servers located in Russia to the European Union? Thank you.
We are preparing the measures necessary to prevent the dissemination of this media inside the European Union. There are technical ways of doing that. And certainly we are going to provide, we are going to supply arms, fighters. We are going to provide even fighting jets. We are not talking about just ammunition. We are providing the more important arms to go to a war. Minister Kuleba has been asking us that they need the kind of fighting jets that the Ukrainian army is able to operate. And we know what kind of planes, and some member states have this kind of planes. And by the time being, you know, the borders, the western borders of Ukraine are still open, as far as I know, no? There are several member states who have borders with Ukraine, and they are open. We are going to provide not only with this 500 million. Apart from that, you have to add all the material the member states, several member states, many member states, each day more, are deciding to provide by themselves. This material is already on the way. Look what Germany has said recently, and by the way, I want to pay tribute and welcome the important speech of the German Chancellor in the Bundestag, which also represents an historical commitment of Germany, not only to the solidarity with Ukraine, but also a significant increase of the German defense efforts. I think that Germany, like many member states, have now understood that if you want to avoid war, you have to be prepared to resist people who want to use the war to put their order above the independence and the freedom of other members, of other countries.
Okay, and now, Lorenzo, you have the floor.
Aska News. Did I understand well, High Representative, that actually the measure concerning the central bank only concerns half of the reserves? Why only half? Why not blocking it completely? And the second thing, I'm curious about the ban. You spoke of a ban about Sputnik and Russia Today. I mean, how? I know there was a prior question. But how is this going to be implemented? Because it sounds strange to me that the EU can ban some media. Thanks.
¿Por qué curioso? Why curious? We consider that these are sources of continued disinformation and brainwashing, and we want to fight against disinformation. And we are going to do that. And understand me well, what I'm saying is that half of the financial reserves of the Russian central bank are placed on banks of the G7 members. And they will block it. And the amount of the reserves placed in banks where we can act is more or less a little bit less than 50%. We cannot block the reserves of the Russian bank who are in Moscow or in China. And on the last years, Russia has been placing their reserves more and more in countries where we could not block. Russia has been preparing financially for a situation like this, abandoning the dollar and putting their reserves on euros and in yens, and yuans, the Chinese, and taking their reserves from the capacity of being blocked. But there are still more or less 50% of these reserves that can be blocked. And I wonder if you realize the importance for a country to lose half of their reserves.
Okay, so this is the end of this press conference. The HRVP has another engagement, and he started already very early, and I think we will meet again.
Can I ask this question quickly for this lady?
Press that President Zelensky goes to Belarus because there are some negotiations. Can you confirm it? Because the Belarusians offer their territory for negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. And is there any action or interaction between you and Russian diplomacy?
No, I cannot confirm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the translators and to everyone.